We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
YouTube said it disabled channels that appear to be part of a coordinated influence campaign against protests in Hong Kong.
Paris and the United Nations call for the protection of the fire-plagued Amazon rainforest as Brazil's right-wing president accuses his French counterpart of having a colonialist mentality over the issue.
The relentless sequence of natural disasters in Asia and the Pacific over the past 2 years has been beyond prediction. The Asia-Pacific Disaster Report 2019 launched on Thursday reveals that recent disasters, especially those triggered by climate change, have grown in intensity, frequency, and complexity, making disaster preparation more difficult.
A number of agreements are expected to be signed during the 8th bilateral meeting between President Rodrigo Duterte and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing on August 29.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Chinese state-run media have launched a coordinated attack on the company that runs Hong Kong's train network for its perceived support of pro-democracy protesters, echoing a campaign against Cathay Pacific. As hundreds of thousands of demonstrators in the financial hub approach their third month of rallying around democratic reforms, Beijing has upped its rhetoric against the movement and any organization appearing to support it. On Thursday, Chinese state-backed outlets accused Hong Kong's Mass Transit Railway, or MTR, company of abetting protesters by offering them a free and exclusive train to escape police after a sit-in to mark a mob attack by suspected triad gang members 1 month earlier. MTR operates exclusive train for violent protesters in Hong Kong and free of charge. This was a tweet from the Chinese official news agency Xinhua in English. Instead of cooperating with the police, the Hong Kong railway system helped protesters escape, wrote the nationalist Global Times in a Chinese language op-ed. The MTR is telling Hong Kong society that radical demonstrators who have committed violent acts not only can avoid arrest by police, but are ultimately able to enjoy free special treatment, the paper added. But the MTR corporation, which the Hong Kong government remains a majority stakeholder, said in a Thursday statement that the trains were meant to help stranded passengers. To ensure the safety of travelers and staff, the MTR company said it had arranged for trains with passengers on board to avoid stopping at stations where there were police actions to disperse the crowds.
Hundreds of accountants, most in suits and wearing masks, hold a rally in Hong Kong City Center in support of anti-government protests. Hong Kong legislator Kenneth Lew told CNBC on Friday ahead of the march said, and I quote, "It's time for us to stage a really civilized and calm march in the central business district to show that we're still not happy with how the whole issue has been handled. And the government has responded positively to the demands of the people." The march was set to take place from Chater Garden in the central district of Hong Kong to the central government office. Accountants are particularly concerned about Hong Kong's extradition bill because they often have to cross over to mainland China for work.
Meanwhile, a flight attendant accused Cathay Pacific of summarily firing her over Facebook posts linked to Hong Kong's political crisis. On Friday, Rebecca C., who worked for the airline's regional arm, Cathay Dragon, and is also a union leader, said she was pulled off a rota to flight to China and summarily dismissed the next day on August 21. Management showed her Facebook post discussing the political situation. C said, but added she was not formally given a reason for her sacking. Take a look.
But it's not just about termination of myself, of the job, but it's also the whole issue. They're terrified. All my colleagues are all terrified because of this white terror. Because we don't want to lose Cathay, a local Hong Kong airline. And it's a message about a core value of Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong Confederation of Trade Unions, or HKCTU, called a news conference after the sudden dismissal of Rebecca C., the head of Cathay Dragon's Airlines Flight Attendants Association, after a 17-year career. Take a look.
So the airlines now link any individual's political positions into their professions and related to the air safety, which is totally unacceptable. We heavily condemned it.
Earlier this month, China's aviation authority ordered Cathay Pacific to stop pro-democracy supporters among its 27,000 staff from working on flights to or over China after a general strike drew out some of its staff. Hong Kong is renowned for its business-friendly environment, rule of law, and freedom of expression. But most major Hong Kong companies have also deep business ties with China, the world's second largest economy. Now, Xi's departure, which Cathay confirmed on Friday, follows last week's shock resignation of Chief Executive Rupert Hogg, the highest-profile corporate casualty of the unrest. Cathay Pacific also confirmed on Wednesday that a pilot who became an internet sensation after expressing support for the city's protesters was, quote, no longer an employee for the carrier. Meanwhile, in a recent interview with CGTN, Grenville Cross, former Hong Kong chief prosecutor, has called for the preservation of law and order in the Chinese Special Administrative Region, and he condemned the violence against tourists and the police force. Mr. Cross said Hong Kong has traditionally been a very safe city that tourists from all over the world visit, but it has acquired a reputation and is showing signs of lawlessness.
Hundreds of Hong Kong secondary students rally at a downtown plaza in support of the protest movement calling for democracy in the former British colony, pledging their support for a planned mass student strike when school reopens in September. Watch this.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong media reported that the interim junction of the international airport was extended. This is to restrain people from unlawfully and willfully obstructing or interfering with the proper use of the Hong Kong International Airport. The restriction was issued by Hong Kong airport authorities on August 14, aiming to restrain protesters from attending or participating in any demonstration or protest or public order event in the airport other than in the area designated by the airport authorities democracy, according to their statement. The violent protests paralyzed the airport for 2 consecutive days. The unrest has also dealt a severe economic blow to the region. The High Court of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, or HKSAR, approved the extension of the injunction on Friday without indicating how long it will last.
President Duterte said whether Chinese President Xi Jinping likes it or not, he would insist on invoking the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling during his upcoming trip to China. President Duterte said the first thing he would do when he sets foot in China for the 5th time during his term is to invoke the arbitral ruling.
Even then, that's why I'm going to China. And the first thing that I will bring out before them, the arbitral ruling. Ganito yan eh. So we do not go to war. Okay. Hindi naman talaga tayo pwede magipag-era sa kanila. I will just feed my army and the military and the police to the mouths of hell. Mamamatay lahat yan. Now how? Tell me. How do we start to solve the problem peacefully? There has got to be something. You just cannot talk air. At sabi nila, hindi pag-usapan. Sabi ko, no. If I'm not allowed as a president of a sovereign nation to talk whatever I want to talk about, then let us not rather, to me, talk altogether. Huwag na. Do not control my mouth because that is a gift from God. If there is a start in the exploration and in the extraction of whatever wealth there is in the bowels of the earth, the proposal of 60-40 in our favor would be a good start. I hope that it would graduate into something like towards how do we solve the arbitral ruling peacefully. What is there? You have to share with us. Any other adventures or expeditions in the marine oceans of our exclusive zones, economic zones, will have a direct bearing on that arbitral ruling. Hindi ako papayag na tiwa yan. Hindi naman ako makipag-away. Pero ang balita ko kasi yung mga taga-Romblon matatapang. Dito ako kuha ng mga sundalo una.
Meanwhile, a number of agreements are expected to be signed during the 8th bilateral meeting between President Duterte and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing on August 29. That is according to the Department of Foreign Affairs on Friday. DFA Foreign Assistant Secretary Menardo Montealegre said the two leaders would discuss accomplishments as well as the shared goals under the comprehensive strategic cooperation between the Philippines and China. Take a listen.
8 August to 1 September 2019. This will be the 5th visit of the President to China. In Beijing, the President will hold bilateral meeting with President Xi Jinping to discuss the accomplishments as well as the shared goals of the Philippines and China under our comprehensive strategic cooperation. President Duterte looks forward to exchanging views with President Xi on how to accelerate the pace of our functional cooperation in terms of concrete projects as well as on issues of mutual interest to both countries. This marks the 8th meeting of the two presidents. Both leaders will also witness the signing of a number of cooperative bilateral documents and memoranda of understanding, which are all aimed to further increase the breadth and depth of our cooperation between the Philippines and China. Afterwards, the President will travel to Guangzhou to join our countrymen in supporting Gilas Pilipinas as they compete at the FIBA Basketball World Cup. President Duterte will personally cheer for Gilas Pilipinas in their scheduled game against the Italian team on 31 August 2019. While in Guangdong, President Duterte will also receive a call from Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan. The President and Vice President Wang are expected to discuss ways to strengthen cooperation in anti-cooperation efforts, increase trade and investment, and deepen the friendship between our countrymen and the people of Guangdong.
Meanwhile, Monte Alegre also said President Duterte has the prerogative to raise other issues, such as the arbitral ruling that he had previously mentioned, and that he would raise this with his Chinese counterpart during this fifth visit to China on August 28 to September 1. After his Beijing events, the president will proceed to Guangdong to cheer for Gilas Pilipinas against Italy in the FIBA World Cup 2019, and that is on August 31.
That's correct. Actually, the Vice President has been tasked by President Xi Jinping to specifically accompany the President to this game.
In his message for the first ever International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday recalled that world religions espouse tolerance and peaceful coexistence in a spirit of shared humanity. And yet, over the past few months, there have been an increasing number of religious-based attacks.
Freedom of religion.
Today, and for the first time, we observe the International Day of commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion and belief. In his message, the Secretary General recalls the increasing number of attacks that occurred in the past months against against individuals and groups targeted because of their religion or belief. He highlighted that many assaults, like those in New Zealand, Sri Lanka, and the United States, have specifically targeted places of worship. The Secretary General also points out that in many conflicts around the world, from Syria to Central African Republic, entire communities have been attacked on the grounds of their faith. He appeals to resistance and rejection of those who falsely and maliciously invoke religion to build misconceptions, fuel division, spread fear and hatred. The full message is online.
And marking the International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief, observed on August 22, the UN Security Council held an open area formula meeting titled Advancing the Safety and Security of Persons Belonging to Religious Minorities in Armed Conflict. The meeting was organized by Poland in partnership with the UK and the US and non-council members Brazil, Canada, and Jordan. Following the meeting, representatives of Poland, UK, and the US spoke to reporters at the Security Council stakeout. Let's listen in.
Promotion of religious freedom and protection of people belonging to religious minorities constitute one of the priorities of Polish foreign policy in the face of growing threats of terrorism, extremism. Mutual understanding and cooperation among ethnic, cultural, and religious groups is more important than ever. A state of religious freedom worldwide is alarming, is very bad. It is estimated that 1/3 of the world's population suffer some form of religious persecution, with Christians being the most persecuted group.
Freedom of religion or belief is an inherent human right. When we look around the world, conflicts besiege us, and quite often where conflicts take place, it is an unfortunate consequence, but we see the reality of it, that religious communities, faith communities are suppressed, particularly minority communities.
The state of religious freedom around the world is bad, and it's getting worse. According to Pew Research, 83% of the global community lives in a restricted religious environment. That is, that they cannot practice their faith freely. We find in some places around the world a horrific level of violence towards particularly religious minorities.
In May of 2019, the General Assembly, in its resolution, designated August 22 as the International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief, recognizing the importance of providing victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief and members of their families with the appropriate support and assistance in accordance with applicable law.
Freedom of religion or belief is an inherent human right.
Hundreds of demonstrators calling for a Papuan independence rally near the presidential palace in Indonesia capital Jakarta. Riots and demonstrations brought several Papuan cities to a standstill this week as buildings were torched and street battles broke out between police and protesters in Indonesia's easternmost territory. A rebel insurgency against Jakarta's rule has simmered for decades in the resource-rich but impoverished island, which shares a border with Papua New Guinea. Indonesia had slowed internet service in recent days to clamp down on hoaxes and provocative comments targeting Papua's ethnic Melanesian population. But it shut down service completely late Wednesday, although many users still managed to get around the block. Calm appeared to have been mostly restored Thursday after Indonesia sent in 1,200 extra police and military to Papua. A few dozen protesters were arrested. Several police officers had been injured, and there are unconfirmed reports of wounded demonstrators. No deaths have been reported. The unrest came after reports that authorities tear-gassed and briefly detained some 43 Papuan University students in Surabaya, Indonesia's second-largest city, on Saturday, the country's Independence Day.
Menurut saya sekarang Presiden Jokowi sebenarnya keliru bahwa saya ingin katakan bahwa di Papua itu orang Papua tidak membutuhkan yang namanya pembangunan, infrastruktur, kesejahteraan, tidak membutuhkan itu. Tetapi orang Papua punya akar persoalan, itu Indonesia sebagai bangsa yang besar beragam suku, budaya, dan ras, mampu.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Health is our most important.
Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
A UN spokesperson said that the organization is concerned about the recent fires in the Amazon forest, adding that sustaining forests is crucial in our fight against climate change. Take a look.
We're very concerned about these fires, both, I think, for the immediate damage that they're causing, and also because sustaining forests is crucial in our fight against climate change. All forests are essential for the health of the entire world. The international community recognizes this importance of the forest, not only the Amazon, but also the forests in the Congo Basin, in Indonesia. The health being of all these massive, massive forests is critical for the well-being of humanity.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron said wildfires in the Amazon were an international crisis. And he said, "Our house is burning," and he called on this weekend's G7 to address the issue. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro blasted his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, in a tweet as having a colonialist mentality for rallying G7 countries to address wildfires raging in the Amazon rainforest. He said the Brazilian government remains open to dialogue based on objective data and mutual respect. The French president's suggestion that Amazonian issues be discussed at the G7 without the participation of the countries of the region evokes a misplaced colonialist mindset in the 21st century. Nearly 73,000 fires were recorded between January and August this year, compared with 39,759 in the first 8 months of 2018. The embattled National Institute for Space Research said on Monday. That is the highest number of forest fires for any year since 2013 and follows 2 years of declines. Norway on Thursday joined Germany in halting Amazon protection subsidies, accusing Brazil of turning its back on the fight against deforestation. President Macron will, from Saturday, host meetings with leaders of the G7, which comprises the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Canada, in the southwestern resort town of Biarritz.
Meanwhile, Bolivia, like neighbor Brazil, battling intense wildfires that have so far burnt 500,000 hectares. President Evo Morales announced on Wednesday that a new environmental agency or emergency cabinet had been created to tackle the blazes in the Chiquitania area, which borders with Brazil and Paraguay. Morales also announced that the government had hired a Boeing 747 supporter tanker. The plane, which can carry up to 70,400 liters of water, is the largest aerial firefighting aircraft in the world. A fourth helicopter equipped with the Bambi bucket system to carry and release water has also been dispatched to assist the more than 1,700 soldiers, police officers, and firefighters sent into Colombia to combat the flames and provide assistance to the population. Greenpeace has blamed the record number of wildfires in the Brazilian Amazon on deforestation.
South Korea said it will share military intelligence with Japan through the United States after terminating a pact that enabled the two key Washington allies to exchange such information directly. Now, Seoul's decision on Thursday to end the General Security of Military Information Agreement, or GSOMIA, was the latest in a series of tit-for-tat measures that have brought relations between South Korea and Japan to their lowest point in years. The intensifying trade and diplomatic dispute was sparked by a run of South Korean court rulings against Japanese firms requiring them to pay for forced labor during World War II, a long-standing point of contention. Under the GSOMIA, originally signed in 2016, the two had directly shared military secrets, particularly over North Korea's nuclear and missile capacity. It came after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said on Thursday that Washington was disappointed about South Korea's move to end the pact.
We're disappointed to see the decision that the South Koreans made about that information sharing agreement. We were urging each of the two countries to continue to engage.
Meanwhile, both Japan and South Korea are market economies and major U.S. allies faced with an overbearing China and nuclear-armed North Korea. But their relationship continues to be heavily affected by Japan's 35-year colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula in the early 20th century. Japan says a 1965 treaty that normalized relations with a significant financial contribution effectively settled all reparation claims.
The family of a staffer at the UK consulate in Hong Kong have rejected a made-up report by Chinese state media that he was detained in the mainland for visiting prostitutes. Simon Cheng disappeared after visiting the city of Shenzhen from the semi-autonomous city on August 8, and the Foreign Office in London said both British officials and relatives have been unable to speak to him. The Global Times, a tabloid state-run newspaper, and said he had been detained for soliciting prostitutes, citing police in Shenzhen, which lies on the China-Hong Kong border. But a Facebook page run by Cheng's family dismissed the report. This is a made-up crime of soliciting prostitution. Everyone should see it's a joke, the comment said. Beijing confirmed on Wednesday that an employee of the British consulate had been placed in administrative detention for 15 days as punishment by police in Shenzhen for breaking a public security law. The Foreign Ministry said he was a Hong Kong citizen. He's not a UK citizen, which is also saying he is a Chinese person. According to the Global Times, Cheng could be detained for 15 days and fined up to 5,000 yuan for the alleged crime. In an edition on Friday, the tabloid said it was at Cheng's request that police did not contact his family, and that thanks to the British Foreign Ministry and media, which have been hyping it, the case is now fully exposed.
A blast from a homemade bomb wounded 3 people in an attack near an Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank, according to Israel's army. While medics reported one of the injured is in critical condition. Take a look. The incident occurred near the Israeli settlement of Dolev, northwest of Ramallah. Medics from the Magen David Adam Rescue Service said a 17-year-old was in critical condition and is being treated at the scene, and it gave the ages of the 2 others as 46 and 20. Further details were not yet available on the incident. Palestinian attacks on Israeli settlers and security forces occur sporadically in the West Bank, occupied by Israel since the 1967 Six-Day War. There have been concerns of a possible increase in violence in the run-up to Israel's September 17 elections.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday he has ordered the military to prepare a symmetric response after Washington tested a formerly banned missile. Putin said he had ordered an analysis of the level of threat for our country created by the actions of the U.S. and to take comprehensive measures to prepare a symmetric response. The U.S. Department of Defense said Monday it had tested a type of ground-launched missile that was banned under the 1987 INF agreement, which limited the use of nuclear and conventional medium-range weapons. Moscow and Washington ripped up the pact early this month after several months of accusing one another of breaching its own conditions. Russia and China have both warned that Sunday's launch of the nuclear-capable Tomahawk cruise missile with a Mk-41 launcher had heightened military tensions and risked sparking a new arms race.
Addressing a Security Council briefing on August 18 on intermediate range cruise missile tests conducted by the U.S., Undersecretary General for Disarmament Affairs Izumi Nakamitsu said the recent collapse of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty removed one of the few constraints on the development and deployment of a destabilizing and dangerous classes of missiles.
The recent collapse of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty removed one of the few constraints on the development and deployment of a destabilizing and dangerous classes of missiles. As the Secretary General rightly noted, this treaty played an important role in reducing risk, building confidence, and helping to bring the Cold War to an end. The INF Treaty's ending should not be the catalyst for renewed and unconstrained competition in missile development, acquisition, and proliferation. Preventing the spread and emergence of destabilizing weapons remains a vital, unfinished task for the international community in our shared endeavor to preserve international peace, security, and stability.
Meanwhile, the U.S. and Russia traded accusations at the UN Security Council over the recent collapse of the INF. The United States said Russia and China are upgrading and diversifying their nuclear weapons capabilities, and their arsenals are likely to grow significantly over the next decade. Russia, meanwhile, which called Thursday's meeting along with ally China, accused Washington of wanting to flex their muscles.
Какое-то время договор аккуратно выполнялся как Россией, так и США. Однако затем стало все отчетливее понятно, что он, равно как и другие договоренности по разоружению и контролю над вооружениями, стал неудобным для наших американских партнеров, уверовавших в собственную исключительность и все решительнее навязывавших остальным неравноправные, односторонние схемы международных отношений. Мы не созывали это заседание с тем, чтобы уличить наших американских коллег в лукавстве. Сегодня для любого маломальски незаангажированного эксперта в области разоружения это непреложный факт. И сколько бы вы сегодня в ходе нашего заседания не твердили заезженную мантру о том, что к развалу ДРСМД привели именно действия России, последние шаги Вашингтона красноречиво свидетельствуют об обратном.
We've heard a narrative today that the United States had itself been in violation of the INF Treaty because of our recent flight test, which used the Mk-41 launcher that is also found in our Aegis Ashore missile defense system. This is categorically false. The Aegis Ashore system does not have an offensive ground-launched ballistic or cruise missile capability, although it utilizes some of the same structural components as the sea-based Mk-41 vertical launch system installed on ships. The Aegis Ashore vertical launching system is not the same launcher as the sea-based Mk-41 vertical launch system, and the Aegis Ashore system did not violate our INF Treaty obligations.
The 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF, treaty between the U.S. and Soviet Union eliminated missiles capable of traveling 500 to 5,500 kilometers. It was a key achievement of post-Cold War arms control in Europe.
Our INF Treaty obligations.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Huli ng MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng pananood.
Sa gitna ng dilim, ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang maglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
glamorous French resort of Biarritz, police and residents enjoy the calm of eve of the G7 summit, while the famed surfing town is deserted by tourists and turned into a security fortress. French security forces began locking down the resort town of Biarritz on Friday ahead of this weekend's G7 meeting, with the deployment of 13,000 officers seen as heavy-handed by opponents. The popular tourist destination in southwest France is the picturesque Basque region, is normally basking in its annual summer boom at this time of year. Instead, its historic center is now off limits as U.S. President Donald Trump and other leaders of the world's advanced economies prepare to fly in for 3 days of talks that start on Saturday. Surfers have been ordered out of the water on the central beach, the Grand Plague, while the train station and the airport are set to close later Friday for the weekend.
Nous sommes ici au milieu même de la zone interdite, à savoir une largeur de 1700 mètres sur une profondeur de 1400 mètres. Donc zone interdite durant 4 jours, du 23 août minuit au 26 août minuit. Donc interdiction pour tout bateau, tout moyen nautique donc, de passer sur cette zone. Et afin de faire respecter cet arrêté, nous avons mis en place 2 bateaux d'opérateurs intervenants nautiques, donc capables d'intercepter ou de contrôler tout navire ou bateau pouvant arriver sur cette zone interdite.
And even though French authorities have banned demonstrations in Biarritz, there remains fears of violence from anti-government yellow vests and anarchists. A special magistrates court with 17 prosecutors and holding cells with a capacity for 300 people has been set up to try anyone caught committing vandalism or fighting with security forces.
French leader Emmanuel Macron backed the idea of a month of further talks to find a solution to Brexit, while ruling out major compromises as he met British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for talks on Thursday. Like German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Wednesday, President Macron supported allowing another 30 days to find a solution to the vexed issue of the Irish border, which has bedeviled negotiations since 2017. But President Macron, who admitted he had a reputation as the hardest in the gang on Brexit, has rejected Johnson's calls to scrap a key arrangement for Ireland negotiated between the EU and former British Premier Theresa May. At stake is the so-called backstop, which is a provision guaranteeing that border checks will not return between EU member Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is part of Britain. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson considered the backstop to be anti-democratic and an affront to British sovereignty because it will require London to keep its regulations aligned with the EU during a transition exit period.
I think that the technical solutions are readily available, and they've been discussed at great length. You can have trusted trader schemes, you can have electronic pre-clearing for goods moving across the border. I just want to repeat one crucial thing. Under no circumstances will the UK be putting checks at the frontier, and we don't think it's necessary from the point of view of the EU to do that to protect the integrity of the single market. We think there are other ways of doing that. We've got, I think, adequate time to do it. Let's get on and do it.
Google on Thursday said it disabled a series of YouTube channels that appeared to be a part of a coordinated influence campaign against pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The announcement by YouTube's parent company came after Twitter and Facebook accused the Chinese government of backing a social media campaign to discredit Hong Kong's protest movement and sow political discord in the city. Google disabled 210 YouTube channels that it found behaved in a coordinated manner while uploading videos related to the Hong Kong's protests, according to Shane Huntley of the company's security threat analysis group. This discovery was consistent with recent observations and actions related to China announced by Facebook and Twitter, Huntley said in an online post. Twitter and Facebook announced this week that they suspended nearly 1,000 active accounts linked to a coordinated influence campaign.
No different.
Twitter said it had shut down about 200,000 more before they could inflict any damage.
In other news, Russia has launched a rocket carrying a life-size robot to the International Space Station. The robot, named Fedor Experimental Demonstration Object Research, is the first ever sent into space by Russia. Take a look.
Module of the Soyuz MS-14 of the humanoid robot Fyodor. The flight to pave the way for future crew launches to the International Space Station. Soyuz spacecraft now arcing out to the northeast, heading for an orbit 51.6 degree commander seat, if you will, in the descent module of the Soyuz spacecraft. And you can see the commanding as it moves. 44 seconds into the flight. Good roll pitch.
The opening of a hypermarket without cashiers on Sundays in Angers, France is controversial. Take a look. No checkouts, no staff, no wallet required. The store of the future is already here. To make a purchase in an automated convenience store, all that is needed is a smartphone with an application capable of delivering a QR code. The code opens all the right doors, literally, and makes it possible to wander along the aisles, placing selected items directly into a shopping bag. Shelves are equipped with weight sensors. They detect in real time when a product has been removed. Cameras equipped with facial recognition technology located above the aisles capture every movement. The customer's route and the list of items selected are cross-referenced to avoid errors. Another system requires the customer's cooperation. Each selected product must be scanned with a smartphone. The bill is paid using a blank card application. A barcode then opens the shop exit door. According to the OECD General Secretary Angel Gurria, the lack of preparation for the looming digital age is a time bomb on social and political levels. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Ang dengue ay isang nakahahawang sakit na dulot ng dengue virus. Naisasalin ang dengue ng maraming uri ng lamok sa loob ng genus na Aedes aegypti na matatagpuan sa mga tropical at subtropical climates sa mundo. Ating kilalanin ang lamok na Aedes aegypti. Nangingitlog sa malinis na tubig. Namamahay sa malinis na lugar. Karaniwang kumakagat sa gilid at likod ng tao. May puting stripes sa bandang tiyan at binti. At buong araw na nangangagat na dumadalas. 2 oras pagkasikat ng araw at 2 oras bago lumubog ang araw. Huwag hayaang makapasok ang lamok na nagdadala ng dengue sa inyong bahay.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Turning to the environment, the relentless sequence of natural disasters in Asia and the Pacific over the past 2 years has been beyond prediction. That is according to the latest report by the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP. The Asia Pacific Disaster Report 2019, launched on Thursday, reveals that recent disasters, especially those triggered by climate change, have grown in intensity, frequency, and complexity, making disaster preparation more difficult. In 2018, almost half of the world's 281 natural disasters occurred in the region, including 8 out of the 10 deadliest. Armida Alicia Bana, the executive secretary of ESCAP, said that while countries across the region have committed themselves to the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, they cannot achieve many of the SDG targets if their people are not protected from disasters. The report calls for transformative change, with social policies and disaster resilience no longer treated as separate policy domains. Surfers gather in the French town of Guthrie to raise awareness for the planet and its oceans ahead of the G7 summit in neighboring Biarritz. Watch this.
Aujourd'hui, en fait, on organise une rame pour ta planète. Donc, c'est un événement, une sorte de manifestation pour rassembler la communauté des surfeurs, pour justement se retrouver et en fait pouvoir porter la voix des océans et dénoncer notamment la pollution des océans, la pollution plastique.
Can't talk about inequity without talking about the oceans, because 1/3 of the world's population gets their primary source of protein from the oceans. The ocean is central to climate change. It's absorbing most of the heat and much of the carbon.
The fight against Ebola in Goma, a commercial hub facing severe water shortages in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, depends on the generosity of Lake Kivu, which supplies water to health teams. Take a look.
The golden rule to avoid the spread of Ebola is to wash your hands regularly. But for that, you need water. In Goma, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, water is essential in the fight against the virus spreading across the region. Facing shortages, Ebola response teams have had to rely on the generosity of Lake Kivu to supply health checkpoints.
The lake is crucial because it helps vulnerable people, poor people, and it helps in the fight against Ebola. When water is abundant, we can help prevent the spread of the disease.
Finding water in Goma is difficult. The city's water distribution network is outdated and only supplies a few neighborhoods. For many of Goma's inhabitants, access to water means pumping it directly from the lake.
The water problem in Goma clearly shows that only this part of the city is supplied, not the whole city. That's why a lot of people come to the lake to get their water. They also then carry some home for those who need it.
On a daily basis, entrepreneurial water suppliers organize several trips. The lake water is treated with chlorine and then distributed to reservoirs in the region. Water towers like these require 5,000 liters of water per day.
If the lake wasn't there, it would be catastrophic. Maybe the response teams would get water from elsewhere, maybe in Rwanda, in Sake, but it would be catastrophic. We would not even survive. We wouldn't survive because the lake is our only source of drinking water.
Lake Kivu is an essential force in stopping the spread of Ebola and an invaluable resource for the local population. For the people that live on its shores, the waters of Kivu give, shape, and preserve life.
Fitness, health, career. All of these things were showcased under one roof of Canada's West Coast. The Eagle News correspondent Jay Juarez takes us to the Vancouver Fitness Expo. Watch this.
Personal training, group fitness, cycling, and nutrition. All these can be found here at the Vancouver Fitness Expo, your hub for anything fitness. Let's check it out. Fitness, health, career. All of these things were showcased under one roof on Canada's West Coast. The event is broken into two parts: educational sessions and a trade show. The sessions are geared towards fitness professionals and provide personal trainers with continuing education. For most people dropping into the expo, the trade show is the highlight, as well as the latest in fitness equipment. Visitors can sample various nutritional concoctions that promoters say will lead to wellness. We sample some of their delicacies. Just fresh. After satisfying our nutritional needs, we tried out some of the exercise equipment. Now it's time to work out some of the kinks from all that exercise. With the help of Cameron Lichter, we use an Aerolax to help improve circulation.
Okay, so different stages of inflation, right, with the air basically helps to promote blood flow throughout the legs, and it can also basically flush out lactic acid, so a really good recovery tool after any kind of intensive exercise. Feels good. Wow.
Cameron had other gadgets to demonstrate. The show in Vancouver has been held annually since 1993. It is organized by CanFit Pro, an organization that serves Canada's fitness industry and the people that work in it. From the Vancouver Convention Center, I'm Jay Suarez, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and
we're 1 with 25.